get through this chapter. There's at least 3 parts to this, and we've just got the first part tonight. And the challenge is, are you worth following? Are you worth following? As we look around our world tonight, we have many leaders. But let me ask you, who would you follow? Which leader in the world captures your attention, encourages you, gives you hope for the future? There's got to be somebody. Nobody comes to mind? Well, see, that's the problem in our world, isn't it? We've had some great leaders, and we've had some not so great leaders. There have been popular leaders, powerful leaders, and corrupt leaders. But who would we follow today? You know, if someone's worth following, they must show people they have what it takes to follow. We need people who lead by example. We need people who've got aims and purposes. We need people that we can trust. And we need someone who leads us with confidence. And it's no different in the church. Paul wants exactly the same thing. And so he gives instructions. He's already dealt with pastors, what their expectations are for a pastor and elders. And now he's looking at people within the church, particularly at Crete, and he's asking them this very question: are you worth following? Are you worth following? And in our outline, the first thing that he does, he says, prepare the people, but you must tell everyone what to do to follow the true teaching. This is the first thing he says. Now, what does he mean by this? It's a very simple message. He says, practice what you preach. Live it out. Don't be all talk and no action. If you really believe these things are true, then apply them to your daily living. Don't be a hypocrite and say, do as I say, but don't do as I do. Be consistent in your walk and your talk. And the idea here of telling everyone or conversation, it's from a word that means to talk. It's in the present tense, which says keep on talking about these things. Tell people to be consistent in their walk and talk. Make sure that they match. And keep telling people their walk and talk must be the same. Their walk and talk must be the same. It's a very simple message. And he's saying, Titus, look, I know I've given you a big task to do, but I don't want you to get distracted. I don't want you to allow yourself to be intimidated by others who are not going to want to focus on holy living. They're actually going to oppose and resist it. Titus, I don't want you to give in to them. I don't want you to quit. I want you to keep reminding these people about how to live godly lives. He's saying here, make these things or prepare these things to make your life normal and attractive in your living out the truth. So what he's saying to Titus is, I don't want you to be negative about these things, Titus. I want you to be positive. And that means I want you to get alongside these people and do whatever you can to encourage them to actually live a godly life. Now, the importance that Paul has been expressing is, well, how important is doctrine? Why? Why is doctrine important? I've had people tell me, Pastor, don't get all caught up with doctrine. Just tell us what to do and how to do it, and that's all we need. Well, no, it's not. Doctrine is important, and it's important because it provides us with a foundation and an understanding of spiritual truth. When we understand what it is, then we can understand, why do I have to do it? And this is what Paul is saying. if I understand what the holy life and a godly life is like, then I can understand why I should do it. And so it's not just words. It's not just people's opinions. It's God's instruction manual that's to be followed if we're to live godly lives. Now, God expects us. And you may be thinking, why is Paul hammering people to do these things on a constant basis? As you read through his epistles, he's talking about this on a constant basis, living a godly life. Live a godly life. Be a godly example. And if we look at verse 5, verse 8 and verse 10, we do so that we do not dishonor the word of God. That's why we do it. How you live your life is going to affect the way people will view Christianity. Whether they're attracted to it because of your lifestyle or whether they're turned off by your lifestyle. So how you live is very important. People are watching. For example, a Christian wife who is not what she ought to be, a Christian young man who is not what he ought to be, an elder Christian man who is not what he ought to be. It gives people reason to ridicule and mock and blaspheme God's word. And it's interesting, people outside the church know the Bible and can quote it better than what we can. They'll tell you, hey, you should be doing, doesn't the good book say this? And they'll tell you what they think you should be living, but it's different for them. And Paul is saying there are standards that need to be maintained. There are standards that need to be kept as a Christian. And all these standards honour the Lord and his word. Now, these standards are not open for debate. They're not open for argument. They're non-negotiable. They're not to be interpreted any other way than what they're given for. So Paul's message here, very simply in this verse, is practice what you preach in a consistent way in every area of our lives. Be what we should be. Then the second thing is, and this is the long section of it, he says to promote the principles. Titus, it's a difficult task I've given you to go into this church, straighten it out, but understand something here. You need to look at people in your congregation and you need to begin to teach the senior people you have so they can mentor the younger members within the congregation on how to do these very things, how to live godly lives. These senior people have age, they have experience, they have wisdom about life and living, and they're actually crucial in helping people, the younger people, stay on track in living for the Lord. Now, Paul's already given his instructions in chapter 1 to the appointment of men to be pastors and their standards and expectations that God requires. But here, his instructions are for the conduct of all within the congregation of the church at Crete. And these are the principles he lays down and says, these are the ones that you need to teach the people. The first is a mentoring partnership. And he's speaking here particularly about elderly men. And what he says is this: teach older men to be self-controlled, serious, wise, strong in the faith, in love, and in patience. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But yet, there's a fair amount of truth that we're going to dig out. Now, Paul uses a word here for the older men, and it simply means a man who is older than 60. Older than 60. So if you're under 60, you're a young man. Isn't that good? But I'm not letting you off the hook. But an older man is someone who is over 60, someone that has many life experiences that they can draw upon and cannot be easily deceived by things that are false. Paul is saying to Titus, you need to harness, you need to tap in to these older men as a spiritual resource. You need to use them in the church. You need to confront them. You need to challenge them to be role models of a godly life. And you are to hold them accountable for doing so. Now, what should Titus be looking for in these older men? It's not just a matter of you'll do. No, there are characteristics. He says the first quality is these men should be self-controlled or temperate in everything they do. What does that mean? It means these older men do not overindulge themselves. They're not living extravagant lifestyles. They have first-hand experience of doing these things when they were young, can now look back and see the futility of pursuing these things and understanding it doesn't offer you the satisfaction that they promise in life. And when you're young, everything's open and you try things and you find, well, it doesn't give me what I want. As an older fellow, you can look back and say, nah, stay away from that. It doesn't do anything. These men have evaluated their priorities in life through their experiences and found the things that they thought would give them satisfaction didn't. As well as looking at all the possessions they've accumulated along their journey in life and find that they don't give them any real value. At this point in their life, they enjoy the simple things in life because they understand what things are of real value and substance to them. They know what relationships are real. They know what relationships are meaningful from those which are not. They understand the effort that needs to be put into things that are of value. Paul says to Titus, you need to remind these godly men, they have a lot of wisdom, they have a lot of knowledge, and they need to pass that on to the next generation when it comes to establishing priorities and values in life. These men have evaluated what works from what doesn't. They simplified things in life that mean something, are valuable to an individual, by exercising self-control, not giving in to their appetites, lusts, and desires. Wow, that's just the first one. Be self-controlled. If you're over 60, have you reached this stage yet? Where you're exercising self-control, you've evaluated life, the things that matter from the things that don't matter anymore? This is what should be happening at this time in life. The second characteristic is that you're looking for, Titus, is they're dignified or serious and worthy of respect. He uses a Greek word, semnos, to describe it. And these men have strong convictions, strong purposes and behaviour that inspires others to a sense of awe and reverence. They're the people that you want to follow and observe. These men take life seriously. They have lived life long enough to see that life is a gift, to understand that life is something to be used wisely and not take it for granted. They no longer see themselves as invincible or bulletproof as they once did when they were young. It's funny how that happens, isn't it? When you're young, you think, I'm bulletproof. I'm invincible. As you get into your 60s and 70s, you soon realise you ain't bulletproof. And you're certainly not invincible. You find you're very fragile. And you find that sometimes things are not working the way they should. And you've realised that. And these men have seen enough of life. They understand the sorrows and the joys. They've had their share of burdens in their lives with their own families, with their own friends. They understand the world in which they live is not a place that's going to get better. The people are the way they are, and they're not going to change themselves. They've reached a stage in life where they've seen it all. If you like Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun. They see life as it really is, and they appreciate a sunset or a sunrise or a beautiful smile a child to love. These are the things that they value and treasure more than they once did. The third characteristic is they should be sensible. That's interesting. I've often heard, I'm just waiting for the day when he grows up. He's still a child. But I would hope by the time he's reached 60 plus of age, he is sensible. He's learned something along the way. He is a little wiser than what he once was. It means they have discernment. It means they have discretion. And that only comes through age and experience. The many things they've experienced through their lives have given them a strength of mind to know the truth, to know right from wrong, and to have their passions in life under control. In other words, you could say they've got their act together. They've tied up any loose ends of their life, and they think before they do something. They weigh up the pros and cons and the consequences before they do anything. This is discernment, and it's thinking sensibly. Now, that's very different from the way they did things when they were young, because that's the completely opposite. When they're in their youth, they were reckless, impetuous, thoughtless, and often had a lot of instability. Now they've reached the age where they're past that, or at least I hope so. Then Paul adds 3 more characteristics that should mark these older men. Strong or sound in their faith. They have a healthy, well-balanced faith that's fully grounded in the Word of God. It's a solid faith, which is unquestioned. It's an unfavoring faith in God. They've seen enough, been through enough in life, in their 60 or more years, to know God is real, to know that God can be trusted to accomplish His plans and purposes in their life. God has proven Himself to them through all their struggles, through all the difficulties and challenges that life has presented through these men's lives, so they can testify, I trust in God alone. Throughout their lives, in visiting family and friends in the hospital, through the different funerals they've attended, through all the trials and temptations, all the disappointments and frustrations, through all the preaching and teaching of the Word of God, their faith has matured and strengthened them in their walk for the Lord, and they've found things to be exactly as the Lord said it would be. That's men who are strong or sound in their faith. The second thing is they're strong or sound in their love. They're well balanced in their relationship with God and with others. These men have chosen not to allow themselves to become bitter because of what life has thrown at them. Instead, they look for opportunities to become better men because of their experiences. These are men who know and understand that love is not just a feeling. It's not just a physical urge that needs to be satisfied. They've learned through the years what needs to be loved and the priority they set on things that should be loved. These men have learned to love even when it's rejected, even when it's not appreciated. They've learned to forgive. They've learned to sacrificially give on behalf of others. These men do not keep a record of wrongs that have happened to them. They don't seek revenge. Their love never fails. As one man said, one of the tragedies of old age is when people become unloving, bitter, and selfish. This older man that the church desperately needs is one who is healthy in his love. He doesn't love out of emotion. He loves out of principle. He loves because it's right. He loves with his will, not with his feelings. Part of growing old is you don't do everything by your feelings. You do it by will. And the last one, strong or sound in their patience or perseverance. These people, throughout their years, have learned to endure life's trials and troubles. They know what it's like to suffer. They've been through enough trials through the years to have the courage, to have the patience, to keep on keeping on. These older men are like tempered steel. They've felt the heat. They've suffered disappointments. They've suffered frustrations. but they've never lost heart. Even though they may have physical disabilities that may slow them down through ill health, even though they may be alone in their latter years, it's not enough to deter them or change them from who they are and what they're doing. Their bodies may be weaker over time, but their spirit gets stronger. These men will endure and do whatever it takes to be what they should be until the time comes for their departure. They remain strong and true as godly men in serving the Lord with all they have. Paul says to Titus, these older men are a must for you. You must encourage them to remain and be role models for those coming through so they can pass on their wisdom, their knowledge and experiences to enable the younger generations to avoid the pitfalls in life and live these godly lives. Now that's a challenge, isn't it? Older men should be used in the church, but he doesn't stop. He goes on to what I call managing pathways. While older men are important, older women are also an important resource for teaching younger women how to live godly lives. We've already discussed in 1 Timothy 5 the older women who have become widows and who are over 60, who have been one-man women, chaste, faithful, pure wives, who have a good reputation for good works, who brought up children, who showed hospitality to strangers, assisted them in distress, devoted themselves to every good work. These women are the ones you need to care of. And that's what we learned in Timothy. Now, if they have a family, let the family take care of them. If they don't have anyone to take care of them at all, he says in the same chapter, their only hope is in God. Then you take care of them. These kinds of women are worthy of your care. Bring them into the church. They're precious. Encourage them to be role models to the younger women in the church. And he goes on to say in these verses, in the same way, teach older women to be holy in their behaviour, not speaking against others or enslaved to too much wine, but teaching what is good. Paul says, likewise, or in the same way as the older men, they should have the same characteristics that show godliness and wisdom that are required to pass down to the younger generation of women in the church. The older women are to be godly in their behaviour. And the original brings out they're to be like priests. They have access to God. These are women who could enter God's presence because of the godly lives that they live. And he says, do not be like diablos. That's what the Greek word here is. Do not be like diablos, meaning don't be malicious gossips or slanderers. Don't be diablos, meaning to be like the devil. Don't be violent with your words. Choose your words carefully before you open your mouth, thinking about what you say and the consequences of your words. Wow. It seems that many of the older women in the Isle of Crete didn't have much to do. And because of this, they spent much of their time gossiping about others, offering criticism, fault-finding, which became a way of life for many of them. And Paul's message is, watch your tongue. Be careful how you use your tongue. Then he says to the old woman, do not be enslaved to much wine. And in the original, it's linked to that of being a drunkard. Now, there is some evidence to suggest that in Crete, the lifestyle of the older people was to indulge themselves in things that would stimulate their bodies and tired mindings. And so this warning is appropriate. The older women are not to be slaves when it comes to wine. They are to be self-controlled. In other words, they're to be in control of their faculties, of their senses. Now you might be saying, well, why should they drink wine at all? Let's keep it in mind, as one commentator says about the use of wine in those times. Wine was generally mingled with water or reduced to a paste without fermentation. Then water was introduced into it again, and it could be drunk. The implication here is not what they were drinking normal wine, which would be mixed with water so you wouldn't get drunk from it, but the idea of someone who was a drunkard. Perhaps in the pain of their old age, maybe even the loneliness of their old age, they wanted to use it to dull their senses a bit. So they gave themselves over to these things. And Paul is saying, it's not for you as an older woman. a Christian woman. It's not for you. They need to be in full use of their senses for God's purposes. They'd be like priests who draw into God's presence. Their tongue is to speak nothing but what is edifying and seasoned with grace. Never are they to talk like the devil does, slandering or gossiping, and never are they to become slaves of anything that inebriates them or takes them away from their senses. Wow. Strong, isn't it? And the third thing he says, it's a positive one, they have a responsibility of teaching what is good. The original word uses kalos, diskalos, meaning teachers of good things, teachers of things of value, teaching of excellence. In other words, things that are valuable, things that are important and will have a lasting effect. These older women know and have lived a life that is a model of goodness. Their children have grown up. Now they've reached the position of being in their senior years. And the idea that Paul says to Titus is this: utilize them. They have knowledge that passes down. Let them be an example to the next generation of young women, rather than have them retiring and traveling around the world and wandering away from the church. He says, Titus, this is the best time to get hold of them. Utilize their experiences and help them become good teachers to the young women coming through the church by mentoring, discipling, modeling, and setting the example of godly living as it relates to marriage, family, and the home. Now, we've just scratched the surface. But Paul says this is what should be reflective of those within the church at Crete. He's looked at the older men. He's looked at the older women. And he's laid down the instructions. We need older men and older women who have lived their lives and are now, if you like, in their golden years. Not to fade out into oblivion, but to be useful in passing down that knowledge and experience to the younger ones. Now, when we get to dealing with the younger ones, it's going to be difficult because most of the younger ones don't want to hear what the older generation have got to say. They always say, you're a fossil. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't lived. You don't know what it's like. Well, I'm sorry, but 60 or 70 years gives you the advantage. You know what life is about. And someone in their early 20s, it's all before them. But it's interesting, if they want to know something, what do? They Google it. Google solves everything. Dr. Google has an opinion about everything. But the life experiences of mum and dad always overrule Google. But there is a responsibility that Paul is making very plain, that older men, older women are to be role models for the younger generation coming through. Otherwise, they won't have the platform or the foundation or the skills necessary for marriage, for family, and home life. And that's important because what is under attack today more than anything else, marriage, the family, and the home. It's being destroyed. And it's been instructed or been targeted for our younger ones. Where's the church? Why aren't we doing and using these resources? Older men, older women. And you're probably saying, well, Pastor, lets me off the hook. I'm not